Hello again and welcome back to another build video. Today we're going to be building the Porsche 911 GT2 from Tamiya. To start off the build, I quickly highlighted the seams on the body and then pushed them aside for later. The next thing I moved on to was assembling together the underbody. Afterwards, I moved on to assembling and painting the brakes. To start off, I painted the brake discs with X11 chrome silver. Once I finished with the brakes, it was time to airbrush the underbody. For the color of the underbody, I chose X15 light green. Once dried, I began painting the main engine with XF16 flat aluminum. After allowing the paint to dry, I began applying panel line accent black. Then I moved on to assembling the engine along with a few other parts into the underbody. Now let's move on to the car body. For this build, I purchased the scriber from Tamiya to test out the tool. Now let's compare the two scribers I have together, side by side. Now, from using both tools side by side, the Tamiya one is more for broader scribing on larger areas, since it produces a wider recessed line than the third-party one I have owned in the past, which produces more of a thinner recessed line, and it's more for detailed work such as scribing small, tiny recessed areas, which a larger scriber wouldn't be able to scribe. Once I finished sanding the car body, I moved on to assembling the spoiler. For this kit, Tamiya gave a few options on what spoiler to put on. I decided to use a more customized spoiler for this kit. After doing so, I moved on to priming the main car body. For priming, I used a Krylon flat black primer that is quick to dry, and after a few coats, I allowed the paint to dry overnight. I next began to wet sand the primer to ensure that the paint would be extra smooth for the primary coats. Now let's move on to the paint job. I started off the first few coats with X2 gloss white and would later cover the white with X15 light green. This is so the light green could be highlighted more. I also took the time as well to paint the roll cage and the back seat piece. To paint the silver parts of the body, I used a 1mm chrome marker to carefully paint the parts. After the assembly of the dashboard was complete, I applied 4 to 6 clear coats of lacquer paint onto the body and allowing it to cure. I also went ahead and assembled a bit of the interior. To assemble the seatbelts together, I used the same techniques that I did in my first video to assemble together the seatbelts. The difference being in this one is that I used plastic sprues instead of metal staple pieces, which greatly improved the quality look of the seatbelts. I then finished them off by cutting the ends of the ribbon and gluing them together to the roll cage. To complete most of the interior, I moved on to assembling the dashboard, along with applying decals to it. After allowing the decals to fully dry, I applied a thick coat of X22 clear. After the assembly of the dashboard was complete, I applied 4 to 6 clear coats of lacquer paint onto the body. After allowing it to cure, I began painting the interior with Vallejo's black. After allowing the paint to dry on the interior, I moved on to applying the clear parts onto the main body. Afterwards, I then applied the decals. Once they were dry, I added another 4 to 6 coats of lacquer. Once the paint was fully dried, I moved on to wet sanding. This consisted of using 2,500 grit, 4,000 grit, 8,000 grit, and then 10,000 grit sanding sponges. I mostly used these from Godhand, which resulted in a really good shine. After finishing the sanding process again, I jumped right into polishing the body. To start off polishing, I used a basic polishing compound. Afterwards, I would later move on to Tamiya's fine polishing compound. And finally, to finish the polishing, I used Tamiya's finish compound. The results turned out amazing. For the plates, I used a DeLorean license plate. However, the decal disintegrated as soon as I wet the decal. So as a backup, I opted to use another license plate. After assembling the body with the undercarriage and adding the detailed components to the kit, the model was complete.